Vladimir Putin claimed Russian troops have fully captured Pokrovsk and Vovchansk in Ukraine's Donetsk and Kharkiv regions. On November 30, the chief of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces, Valery Gerasimov, reported this to the President of the Russian Federation. Russian military officials updated Putin on efforts to eliminate Ukrainian forces in the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad area and reported the alleged capture of Mirnohrad's southern part by Russian troops. The Russians have started capturing Huliaipol in Zaporizhzhia. Well, ASINT analysts insist that this is all just another lie. In Pokrovsk, as of December, Russian troops controlled about half of the city. In Vovchansk, on the contrary, the armed forces of Ukraine controlled more than half of the city. Well, in Huliaipol, only the northeastern outskirts of the city are in the gray zone. Not to mention Russian control, but time has passed. Putin's announcement of this news was perfectly timed. The purpose of Putin's carefully planned meeting with the high military command of the Russian Federation was to show the world that Russia is supposedly completely winning in Ukraine. After all, this statement was made right before the meeting with Trump's envoy, Stephen Witkoff, who came to Moscow to talk about peace in Ukraine. Well, judge for yourself. The Kremlin stated that Putin was informed about the capture of Pokrovsk 2 days ago, but he made this information public only today, right on the eve of the meeting between the Russian dictator and the key aide to United States President Donald Trump. I'm Alexei Pechiy. Let's discuss this together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and write any detailed comment under it. Also subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as soon as it comes in. And if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation or a paid subscription. Links and payment details are in the video description. Any support is appreciated. So, to put it very briefly, today, Vladimir Putin announced that he had been informed about the complete capture of Pokrovsk and Vovchansk in the Donetsk and Kharkiv regions, as well as that Mirnohrad has almost fallen. And also fighting has begun for Huliaipol in the Zaporizhzhia region. In short, the message is simple. It's supposedly a breakthrough. Russia is being observed along the entire front line. But according to the ASINT map from the Deep State Project, in Pokrovsk, as of December 1st, Russian forces controlled about half of the city, while the rest is in the gray zone. In Vovchansk, Kharkiv region, on the contrary, the armed forces of Ukraine control more than half of the city. In Huliaipol, only the northeastern outskirts are in the gray zone. The American Institute for the Study of War and the Finnish ASSINT Project Blackbird Group also do not confirm the capture of Pokrovsk and Vovchansk. According to their data, Ukrainian forces are still present in the besieged cities and are actively resisting. But Putin claims everything is already captured, while Deep State Project authors say otherwise. Note that every time after clearing certain areas of the city, Russian troops continually bring in new soldiers wave after wave. And I know that there was definitely a video circulating on Telegram, you might have seen it. The kinds of local assaults they're launching at Pokrovsk are intense. One video showed many unwashed Russian corpses who tried to storm it. Yet Putin claims Pokrovsk has already been captured. Judging by the maps from open source intelligence projects, a similar situation has developed in Kupiansk, which Putin reported as captured back at the end of October. Most of the city of Kupiansk is under conditional Russian control, but not the entire territory. Putin listened to reports about the capture of Ukrainian cities on the eve of negotiations in Moscow with Stephen Witkoff. The latter is supposed to present to the Russian dictator a Ukraine peace agreement. But it is already known that Ukraine refuses to withdraw from Donbass, Ukraine refuses to reduce its army, refuses the idea that we should enshrine non-accession to NATO and so on. Moscow states that the war will continue until the Russian army fully captures the Donetsk region, or Kyiv agrees to hand it over to Moscow during peace negotiations. And it's important to understand here that the purpose of Putin's carefully planned meeting with the high military command of the Russian Federation was to show the world, and first of all Trump, that Russia is winning in Ukraine. Moreover, Putin stated again today that in Ukraine, the Russians haven't even started fighting at full strength yet. He says, "You think we're just fighting a little?" The Kremlin stated that Putin was informed about the capture of the cities while visiting the command post on Sunday, although both pieces of information were made public only late Monday evening. On the eve of the Russian dictator's meeting with United States President's key aide Stephen Witkoff, Putin made it clear he wasn't interested in compromises. He says that Ukraine should leave Donbass, reduce its army, and Europe. The United States must legally recognize the new Russian territories. And Putin repeated his maximalist demands to limit the size of Ukraine's army, give up part of its territory, and forbid it from joining. Witkoff's proposal to Putin today has not been made public, but Ukraine has made it clear that it cannot accept any peace plan that would compromise its sovereignty according to Moscow's demands. NATO said today that it will have to increase military aid to Ukraine, funding for Ukraine, and increase sanctions against Moscow. And here I want to point out all the theatrics that the Kremlin has been using in recent days. Putin's visit to a military facility on Sunday, right before his meeting with the Americans, was clearly intended to present Putin as a strong military leader who has the upper hand in Ukraine. Unlike Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who quite regularly goes to the front lines to meet with Ukrainian soldiers, the Russian bald dictator tries to stay as far away from the war as possible. This theatricality is weak and too obvious. He is overacting a lot. Putin's contacts with the military are rare but carefully calculated. For example, in March, let me remind you, in March of this year, Putin also made a show of going to Kursk to meet with the military, put on a military uniform and all the other attributes. And then, exactly 2 days later, that same Steve Witkoff arrived in Moscow for negotiations. So, the Kremlin once again staged another show to demonstrate that Putin is not just a bold little man, but actually a military leader. And so, speaking on Sunday before his top generals, Putin praised them for capturing Pokrovsk. Once again, on Monday, the Kremlin specifically highlighted the events in Pokrovsk by releasing a video showing Russian soldiers unfurling the Russian flag in the center of Pokrovsk. Although this area has been under Moscow's control for some time now. So, this isn't actually Monday's news, but they presented it specifically on Monday evening in order to create a reason ahead of Putin's meeting with Witkoff. Pokrovsk's strategic importance as a Ukrainian supply center has sharply declined after months of intense fighting. Still, its capture would benefit Moscow. The biggest victory since 2023. Nevertheless, one of the Ukrainian commanders fighting in the city told cable news network that Russian troops do not fully control Pokrovsk and that his unit is still holding its positions inside the city. But that's not all. The thing is, these statements about Pokrovsk echo Russia's bold and loud claims about breaking through the entire Ukrainian front line, which were made back in August, just a few days before the meeting between Trump and Putin in Alaska. And here's another act of Putin's show. A couple of days ago, he said that the Russians are ready to seize the entire Donbass by force if Ukraine does not agree to surrender it voluntarily. And today Putin says that, quote, Russian troops are advancing at a pace that guarantees the fulfillment of all assigned tasks. If Putin convinces the world, especially Stephen Witkoff and Donald Trump, that Russia's battlefield victory is inevitable, Ukraine's allies will start to have doubts. Why are we supporting Ukraine? Maybe we should make Kyiv surrender already. If Russia's victory is inevitable, should we negotiate instead? That's Putin's whole strategy. It's actually right on the surface. Yes, it's true that the Russians have sped up their territorial gains in the past month, unfortunately. But the latest assessment of the pace of Russian troop advances, conducted by the Institute for the Study of War, indicates that a Russian military victory in Ukraine is inevitable, and that the rapid capture of Russia and the rest of Donetsk region, which Putin is threatening, is unlikely. This will take a long time. They tormented Pokrovsk for over a year, so even though Putin and his military commanders continue to praise Russian successes and spread rumors about their inevitable victory for Russia, the easiest way to get what they want is either to force Ukraine into an unfavorable deal or to convince Ukraine's allies to reduce their support. And unfortunately, they are succeeding in doing this when it comes to Trump. And everything depends on what Trump's envoy Witkoff will bring him from Moscow now. I'll leave it at that for this episode. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye.